Hey everyone, this is Rocky from WeLearnChess.com, and today we're going to look at the power of pins and how both sides can use pins to try to improve their position or save themselves, either temporarily or permanently, from disaster. So we're going to take a common position that comes up in beginner and intermediate levels and see how both sides can use pins. This actually just came up in one of my games, but we won't look at the whole game, but just sort of the beginning and what could have happened. Okay, so I had the black pieces. White plays the fried liver. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you know that I don't really like this opening very much for white, just because I don't like to play the kinds of positions where I'm, grabbing a pawn and trying to hold on for dear life and survive into a potentially winning endgame. If my opponent doesn't find a way to kill me, I'd rather be on the side trying to kill. So this is the Polaria defense, and if you want to see more about this fried liver opening, you can look at the tag cloud, which is on the left side of the blog page. Just go down on that column, and when you see the tag cloud, you can click on fried liver and see a couple of the other videos. Okay, so we get to this position here, and white has to choose a retreat, and bishop d3 is actually a strong move, surprisingly. But in any case, we're not going to look at all those variations here. This is the worst retreat for the bishop for several reasons, but one of them is just that you can get a position like this where now white is faced with sort of an uncomfortable position. If he plays knight e5, then black gets this fork immediately on the pieces, and it's going to lose material one way or the other here. You would just want to take this bishop. That's one way, and so usually white will take with check here to try to at least get another pawn for the lost material. Here you have to play queen c5 to make sure you trap the knight. The knight will usually sack itself for this pawn here. So now white has 3 pawns for the piece, and it does look a little bit crazy here with all this queenside pawn majority, but that's why you have to keep making threats as black throughout the game so that you can get some of those pawns back, or even better, mate white or get some decisive material. Here it's debatable what to capture back with. The computer gives pretty equal evaluations for both, eventually settling on rook's takes. You just have to be careful about this potential skewers here, but you don't have to be too worried right away because white does not have any pieces out. He can't really play for tactics yet. Like if you try something like this, then that just doesn't work. So you're going to take this queen with check, and after it takes here, this is even worse. Now the game really is over. Anytime white tries to go for an early tactic in these fried liver and he has like 1 or 0 pieces out, you try to look for ways to refute the idea. Here, this is just a bad position for white. We won't go further than that there. So those variations show one reason why the bishop a4 retreat is bad, and another reason is that in this position, after bumping the knight a couple times, if white were to try to retreat back to g1, then he's just underdeveloping, so that just increases black's initiative. One quick note is here that I used to think this was a good move for black here, attacking the bishop and putting some pressure on f2, but with the idea of bringing the bishop to c5. And that would be good, of course, if white did something silly like that, then this would be just crazy. I mean, he has to play bishop e2 here, and you can just castle with the idea of bringing the rook over. If he plays the knight out, then he's not able to play c3, and you can just improve your position. You're not mating white immediately, but you're just increasing pressure. He's probably got to play something like knight e4 just so that he can, at some point try to get his pieces out here. Probably he could just drop the bishop back and just shift your attention from this diagonal to this diagonal. That'll happen in a couple different variations. Like for example, if he were to try to play c3 without developing the knight, like just here, you could probably bring the queen back actually just to be safe, and then maybe create your battery with the bishop first. That would also work. But in any case, you'd probably be switching over to the other diagonal. But still, you have a lot of pressure here, and then that would actually, if you get your pieces, like we saw in that last variation, or if you get your battery over that way, then he can't really ever castle over there. At least it's going to take him, another couple moves so he can protect the diagonal before he does. So anyway, of course, this isn't a good move for white, so he can just play c3 here, which attacks the queen and protects the bishop. So It's just a wasted move for black, so that's actually not a good move, but you can actually play bishop c5 with the idea of whatever with white plays afterwards to get the queen over to b6 and then create your battery that way. And again, just keep increasing your initiative from there. So that's why the knight g1 idea is bad. Again, it's going to take more moves to get back out, so white's got to find a way to get rid of this annoying pawn that's cramping his position, get his pieces out, get castled, everything's on the back rank. This is just really terrible. So that's another reason why this bishop a4 retreat is bad, because it doesn't really leave white with a lot of options. So the only really move here for white to stay in the game, now that he's put himself in this position, is to play queen e2. So we've got a couple pins already here in the position. White is exploiting this pin here on the c6 pawn. That's the reason he stayed on a4, because he wanted to keep this pressure. And at some point, for example, if later in the position we might see that after black castles and puts a rook on e8, then he's got rooks on light squares here, so there's potential forking ideas if this knight ever moves. So there are ideas in the position here for white, some of them based purely on these pins, and of course this pawn is pinned to the king here. So you have to be careful here for black. My old version of Stockfish last year, I remember you used to tell me to play bishop e7, which is just a bad move, because now white can play knight e5, and here this sequence doesn't work, because after you try to trap the knight, he doesn't have to sack himself for the pawn. He can just take this bishop, and now black's lost the bishop pair. There's too many pieces off the board. He doesn't have that great of development, and he doesn't really have the ability to make as many threats, so you don't want to get into this position. So that's why bishop e7 is a bad move there. So instead, you just want to put it on a more active square. At least you're on this nice diagonal. It's not really doing something right now, but in the future it could. You do have to pay attention to potential pawn forks here on b4. But again, white is not developed enough to try to do this. If he tries to go for it right away, well, you can even just castle. I mean, here, that's not a pawn fork, because this pawn's no longer a pin, and it comes with a tempo and attack for the queen. So, although you do have to keep your eye out for these ideas, especially because you have to move two pieces potentially, and because this pawn is still potentially pinned, you want to try to react assertively when you're playing black with these in this position, not defensively, or try to use active defenses, tactical defenses, try to create threats as much as possible so that white is responding to you and not the other way around. Otherwise, you can just get in a position where white ends up consolidating, and then he is just up a pawn or two, and then you just have, bad position. So, okay, so bishop c5 is a good move here. So white could castle, but also let's look at a common move here, which would be d3, which is just to try to get rid of this pawn. And take care of the attack on the knight this way. Black could castle here, but there's probably a better idea, so if you want to put your video on pause and see if you can find it. So the topic of this video is pin, so if you look for a pin here, black does have one actually. So we can see that they're both absolute and relative pins in the position. Absolute pins are when the pieces or pawns can't move by the rules of chess. So these two pawns are absolutely pinned to the king, they can't move. And the d3 pawn is in a relative pin. I mean, it could move if it wanted to, but it would just result in such heavy loss of material that it's basically not strategically a good idea to do that. So we've got several pins going on here. White probably would want to castle at this point. Black could castle here. And this pawn is still pinned, so it can't be taken, and now the knight is under attack. So white has to do something. If it moves over to h4, it's opening itself up to discoveries on the queen, and then it's also on the rim. It's not really clear what it's doing there. So computer actually gives us best knight e1 with the idea of potentially taking back on d3 with the knight and getting a tempo on the bishop. So but now if you look at this, it's kind of funny, because white had a few pieces out. Now he's got one less piece out, so he's actually underdeveloping. That's terrible for when you're already down in development. You don't want to underdevelop. But okay, here comes another point in the position where we could just take, obviously, but if we do, then like I said, white can just take back here, and now he's got a tempo, and anytime white gets a tempo move in these openings, it's usually a bad idea for black, just because you're getting closer and closer to letting white consolidate this position. So you want to look for a better idea here, And black has this idea of adding pressure by exploiting this pin here on this d3 pawn because it can't move. So the computer actually gives best here, retreating the queen, and this is getting close to comical here just because now white only has one piece developed, everything's on the back rank, and black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces developed, both bishops on adjacent diagonals. The pawn is still pins relatively to potential loss of an exchange to the rook, and also the pawn is pinned another way or it's pinned the same way but for the same reason, because now the queen is unprotected, so can't take this way either. Due to this, I'm sorry. Well, it's not way to move, but okay. Yeah, and you could even argue that black's queen is developed because it's on an open file, so potentially 6 pieces to 1 here. And it's hard for white to move his pieces. So here probably what black should do is try to find a way to create another threat. You don't want to try to do anything slow here. One idea is that you could exploit the fact that this pin is still here by improving the position of the queen and connecting your rooks. So here you have a couple moves. One idea is queen d6, where you can both protect this pawn a little bit more in case the knight has to move, and also take a look at this h2 square. Another idea is to play queen d7, which allows you to play an interesting move on your next move. I think both of these moves are quite reasonable. Even queen c7 is interesting. But here, white probably has to do something to develop his pieces. I mean, it's almost desperation time. And here, because you played queen d7, you could play knight g4, which adds another threat. And the point is that if white tries to do something like, again, these tactical moves, like he's trying to fork you, instead of playing some defensive retreat, you don't want to do that. I mean, you want to try to find a way to punish white, and you can do that here with knight takes, and after rook takes, now we've got another pin, another absolute pin. Instead of just taking back, you can improve the position again. When you have a pin, try to pile up on the piece, on the pin piece or the pin pawn, and not just in a haphazard way, but look and see if you can improve your position. Now you're threatening a mating combination if you didn't do anything. So I don't even know. The computer gives best queen e3, bishop e3, which is just kind of silly. But something like this, this is terrible. Yeah, probably d2. This rook can't take this. Yeah, you get something like this. I mean, eventually you're going to be able to take this exchange. You could even, again, just exploit the fact that you've got so much going on in your position. And here, even if you tried for the pawn fork, it still wouldn't work out favorably, because after it takes and queening and takes, I mean, you have another pin going on, plus you're going to be up so much material, it'll be just game over. So always try to find ways to add pressure to that pin is the idea, and this would be one way to keep putting pressure on white. I'm not sure what's best. We should probably stop here just because it's getting a little bit long, but the point is both sides were trying to use the pins here, and it looks like black's come out better in this variation, but the moves had to be played quite precisely, of course, by black to take advantage of these poor opening choices by white. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you get this position way back here in your positions as black, then just remember here that you want to play for an active move with your bishop, and if something like this, then try to start using the pins to your advantage. Quickly take a look at it. And then we got into that position where black was able to keep piling up here. So have fun in your games, and good luck.